Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and to another episode of Flute Life with Katie Flute. If you're new here, please consider subscribing to my channel so you can join the Flute Life fam. That sounded way less cringy in my head than when I said it out loud. But yeah, join our Flute Life fam. Is this what I have to do to be a real YouTuber? Anyway, hi! Anyway, if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please consider doing so. I post new videos every week. So over time, I've gotten a lot of requests to make a video that is geared towards ultimate flute beginners, and that is what we're going to do today. I thought we could kind of go over the ins and outs of what to do once you've gotten your first flute, how to practice, what to practice, and all of that. I also have 3 great beginner options for flutes to show you, and these all come from the Flute Center of New York. The Flute Center is sponsoring today's video, so thank you so much to them, and thank you to them for providing me with these flutes so I can show them to you. For those of you who don't know, the Flute Center of New York is this huge flute store here in New York City, but they also ship worldwide. They have practically every brand and model of flute you could imagine, and they also have a huge sheet music collection. My friends there have set up a deal for you guys if you're interested, and if you use my code KTFL when shopping there, you'll get free shipping, an extended 10-day trial period, which means that you can select up to 3 flutes. The Flute Center will send them to you for free, and you can try them for 10 days instead of the normal 7. And if you're an ultimate beginner in this case, that's a great time for your teacher to help you choose the instrument and to have them try them out as well. You'll also get an extended 18-month warranty on any instrument that you might decide to purchase. My code also works to give you a 10% discount off of sheet music. I'll put all of that info down in the description box below in case you guys are interested. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump right on in and get started. So I have 3 flutes here, and 2 of them are some of the ones that I showed you in my buying your first flute video. We have this Yamaha model 222. And we have this Pearl model 500. And then the one that I did not show you in that video is this Gemeinhardt. I did show you a Gemeinhardt in that video, but this one is a slightly different model. The other one was silver plated, but this one is black nickel plated. I thought it looked cool and that it would be fun to show you guys this one. So all 3 of these flutes are great, reliable beginner student flute options. I'll link them all down in the description box below in case you guys are interested and want to check them out. So for the remainder of this video, I think I'm going to use this Gemeinhardt since it's the one that I didn't show you in the other video. So first off, you need to know about the 3 parts of the flute. If you've seen my switching instruments with my boyfriend video, you know what the 3 parts of the flute are not called. Do you know what this is called?
I'm not sure.
No.
Headjoint.
Headjoint? Okay, good. And what's this part called?
The one with the keys.
Yes. And what's this part called?
The end of the flute.
Good enough. So when you open your flute case, it's going to look like this. Don't let it fall out. That would be tragic. I'm trying to be very careful. So you have the head joint, this part right here. You have the body of the flute, this long thing with all the keys. And then you have the foot joint of the flute. It goes on the end, which is why it's called the foot joint. So yeah, not too complicated. 3 parts. As an ultimate beginner, the head joint is going to be the part of the flute that you're going to want to focus on for the beginning of your studies. So maybe your band director just gave you your first flute to take home, or maybe you're an adult student and you just ordered a flute off of the Flute Center of New York's website. Just saying. My biggest piece of advice for any brand new flute student that just got their first flute would be don't rush to put the entire flute together. I know it's really tempting to just put everything together and go for it, but if you can start off your studies with a really solid foundation of making a great sound on the head joint, you're going to be setting yourself up for a much better life of fluting. Life of fluting. I don't know where I come up with some of these things. It all sounds better when I'm not saying it out loud. Life of fluting. Okay, but seriously, just don't rush and put everything together. So, you're going to take your head joint, So as you can see, we have this guy here. This is called the lip plate, and this is where you're going to rest your chin, or your lip. You can see that one side is bigger. There is more space here. And that is the side that you're going to want to put here, like so. So you want the crown of the head joint, this top part here, to be facing to your left, and you want the majority of the head joint, the longer part, to be facing to your right. So like so. So as far as making a sound is concerned, you can kind of imagine how it feels to blow across the top of a bottle, maybe you have, and that's kind of the same deal here. We don't really want to think about our air being super across though, because then it gets this kind of airy sound. Oh, so descriptive, airy. The air sounds airy. I like to instead tell my students to think about blowing their air, directing it down into the flute by using this top muscle here. So you're going to use this top muscle here that you can kind of, I think some people call it like a bunny muscle, because you can kind of like, okay. Anyway, thinking about using this muscle to aim the air stream down. So instead of the air is going this way, using this to aim it down. I feel like I'm making this more complicated than it is. It's kind of a lot of trial and error. I mean, it is a lot of trial and error. You have to see what works for you, what doesn't. Everyone's embouchure and lips are different. So imagine that you are blowing over the top of the bottle. I think the most common problem that I see with some of my beginner students is that the aperture, the hole through which the air is coming out of, is way too wide and the air is just escaping everywhere. So you kind of want to think about making it as small as possible so that the airstream can be super direct, like a laser beam. So this is the wrong way. I'm going to get really close and personal. So this would be the wrong way. The air is just escaping in all directions. But if you can kind of tighten things up, you don't want to have a lot of tension here, but thinking about making the hole a lot smaller. Yeah. And an activity that I like to do with some of my beginning students, especially the ones that are much younger starting off, is to take a pom-pom and to put it on the end of a long table or even on the edge of your music stand, and to see if they can blow it completely straight off of the table or the music stand. And they have to use a strong enough airstream to do this. If you aren't directing your airstream correctly, the pom-pom is not going to move very far, or it's going to kind of just like move to the side. But that really helps to illustrate the amount of air and the type of airstream and direction of air that you're going to be needing when you're playing the flute. So once you've gotten that initial raw sound down, you're going to want to start thinking about using your tongue in order to articulate. If we didn't use our tongue to articulate on the flute, everything would sound slurred or connected. Once we add in articulation by using our tongue, there are a lot more musical possibilities. So in a nutshell, that's why we use articulation. When teaching articulation in the very beginning, I like to tell my students to imagine that they have an uncooked grain of rice on the tip of their tongue, or a watermelon seed, anything of that size, and to imagine that they're going to try to spit it across the room. More getting up close and personal. This is just awkward. I'm sorry you will have to see this. But hopefully it's helping somebody out there. Okay, so. It's a very subtle movement. It's not a huge like or anything. So you want the tongue to slightly peek out between the lips, and then it's going to retract backwards. Sometimes with my students that are having trouble really figuring out the mechanics of all of this, I really have them take uncooked rice grains and spit them across the room. It makes a mess, but it normally only takes them a few times to try this, and then they're able to transfer it over to the head joint. The thing about articulation is that it's really important that you have enough air behind it. You can't create sound with just the tongue. I mean, you can create a small amount of sound, but you need to have the correct amount of air support behind it to make a sound. And that's where the whole spitting the rice or the watermelon seed thing comes into play, because you're not going to be able to shoot it across the room unless you're using a good amount of air. Also, I want to mention that it's important to be checking everything out in a mirror when you're doing this so you can see what worked, what didn't, and so that you're really aware of everything going on with your embouchure. And then once you can make that basic sound with the articulation on the head joint, there are a lot of other things that you can do to practice. There's this great book that I like to use with my beginning students, and it's called Flute 101. And there's an entire section that is just exercises for the head joint, but it gets you reading music, reading rhythms, and working on the coordination of having to do something with this hand while you're directing your air into the flute, which is going to be helpful later when you have to introduce playing different pitches with the keys. And there's also a few little songs in that book that you can play with just the head joint. Which can be a fun way to mix up your practice when you're feeling like, I just want to move on and put everything together. But I would say wait until you get all of those things feeling really solid before you move on to the next step. I think it's really important to practice on the head joint until you feel comfortable making a consistent, good sound. A lot of beginner method books start you off by putting everything together right away, and they're like, here, hold this flute and do this and do that, and you have to be thinking about all these things at once. But in the beginning and all the time, I think the most important thing is really sound. Sorry, essential elements. Also, don't worry if you can't make a sound right away. I remember when I started, when I was in 4th grade, I was 10 years old, and I was super frustrated because I just couldn't figure it out. It took me maybe like a month to be able to make a good, consistent sound, and I got really frustrated. I wanted to quit at one point, but I just kept going and persisting, and it worked itself out. It just takes a lot of trial and error. It's a new skill, and you're using your body and your air in a way that you never have before, so of course you're probably not going to be able to do it right away, or maybe you are, like hit or miss.
Oh,
You're
wow.
natural.
Wow,
wow.
that's really loud.
Yeah, now you know how I feel all the time. But that's another story. He's a special case. So once you can pick up the head joint and consistently make a good sound and feel comfortable doing that, it's time to put everything together. So putting the flute together is fairly simple since there are only 3 parts, but you want to do it correctly so you don't damage the instrument. So when you pick up the body of the flute, it's important to hold it by the barrel here and not grabbing the keys like this because they are fragile, they can bend, and you don't want that to happen. Same thing for picking up the foot joint. I like to just grab at the very end here instead of grabbing the keys. And then this part, the body and the foot joint, go together like this. It's important that when you put it on, you don't do this or do that. Put it at an angle because it will bend this part here, and you don't want that to happen. So like so, and then you can twist it like this until it all fits together. And you want to line up this rod right here through the middle of the keys like this. Some people prefer to have it a bit more rolled in or out, but as a beginner, this is a pretty standard setup with the rod going through the middle of these keys. And then for the head joint, same thing. You don't want to have it going this way or that way when putting it in. Holding from the barrel here, holding from the barrel of the head joint, and just twisting it on like so. You never want to grab your flute from the lip plate because it's soldered on, but it could potentially fall off. And then if that happens, you drop your whole flute, and yeah, it's not good. And as far as setting up the head joint, a standard setup would be to have the hole in the embouchure plate to line up with these keys here. In order to tune the instrument to some degree, a lot of it is just done by ear and how you adjust your embouchure and your air. But you might want to check with a tuner. Your teacher can help you to see exactly how far in or pulled out you want to have the head joint. It really depends on the particular model of flute and also the player. So now we've put our entire flute together. I find that a problem that a lot of people run into once they put the whole flute together is that they try to go and reproduce that sound that they made on the head joint earlier that they were able to do really well. And then when they put everything together, they can't quite reproduce it. I think a big reason why that happens is that they're trying to figure out how to balance the flute here with their hands, and that then this is not so steady and stable like it once was when all they were doing was holding on to the head joint. With my beginner students, I like to have them take the barrel of the flute in their right hands like this, and then put it up to the playing position, just kind of like how we did when you were only using the head joint. And then from there, have them recreate that same sound, and then figuring out where to put the left hand. This method of holding the flute in the beginning allows you to play several different notes with your left hand, but ensuring that you have this really stable setup with the head joint. So then for your left hand, we have these keys here. This is the key that you want to put your pointer finger on. Then you want to skip this key, jump to the next one, and you're going to put your middle finger here, and then your ring finger is going to go here. So pointer finger, skip this key, middle finger, ring finger. And then you're going to place your thumb on this key in the back. The Flute 101 book that I was talking about earlier also recommends this initial hand position. There are several exercises in that book that only use these left hand notes to start off with, which I think is really great. The notes that you can play with this left hand setup are C, which is just the pointer finger, B, which is pointer finger and thumb, A, which is pointer finger, thumb, middle finger, and G, which is pointer finger, thumb, middle finger, ring finger. Once you feel comfortable with those notes and you're consistently creating a good, clear sound on them, then it is time to move on to the second and final, the ultimate way of holding the flute. So now we're going to go from here to here. Your right hand pointer finger is going to go on this key, your middle finger is going to go on this key, and your ring finger is going to go on this key. And then down here we have this little guy shaped like so, and that is where your pinky is going to go. Your thumb is going to rest under your pointer finger, and it's going to help you to balance the flute. So when you play the flute, your body is not symmetrical. It's not the most comfortable thing initially, and you have to really be careful that you don't use too much tension in your hands when playing, so that you're not gripping the flute and like crushing the keys. So with some of my students, and sometimes even for myself, to remind myself this, I like to put the flute up with the left hand and then just kind of plop down the right hand in its position so that you can really feel that there's no tension there. So this right hand position is now going to allow you to play all the other notes on the flute. So now I'm going to show you a few other notes that you can expect to learn towards the beginning of your flute studies. Also, I should mention now that we're putting the right hand in its final and correct position, you're going to want to have your right hand pinky down for these other notes that we talked about with the left hand. So with C, B, A, and G. You're going to press down all the keys that we talked about earlier. So the thumb, the pointer finger, the middle finger, and the ring finger on the left hand. And then to make our next note, F, you're going to press down this pointer finger on the right hand and your pinky. Then to play E, you add your right hand middle finger. To play D, you add your right hand ring finger and you take off your pinky. Then to play E flat, you put down your right hand pinky, as well as all the other keys. To play B flat, you put down your left hand thumb, your left hand pointer finger, your right hand pointer finger, and your right hand pinky. For For younger students, jumping to holding the flute in this correct position can be difficult, mostly because they are just too small to hold it correctly and comfortably. So I would suggest that they get a curved head joint, which will essentially shorten the flute and make it so that they can hold it much more comfortably. So to put it in very simple terms, in order to play higher on the flute, you need to use faster air, and to play lower on the flute, you need to use slower airspeed. There are several notes on the flute where you keep your fingers in the same position, but in order to change the octave, you either use faster air or slower air. So for example, that B that we learned earlier, if I simply just use faster airspeed, I can change the octave of the note. Here are some other notes that you keep your fingers the same and just use the speed of your air to change the octave. Some notes that you also have to change your fingers along with the speed of your air are D and E flat. They will come out if you leave down your pointer finger, but the sound is not going to be as clear, and your teacher is going to be like, lift your pointer finger, lift your pointer finger. At least I feel like I say that 1,000 times a day to my students. So just do it so I don't have to say it. Just lift your pointer finger. Lifting the pointer finger helps create a clear, beautiful sound. A few days ago, I posted over on my community page to let you guys know that I was making this beginner flute video, and I asked you if you had any questions or topics that you wanted me to address regarding beginner flute studies. I thought that there would be a few questions, but there were almost 100, so I clearly can't get to all of them, and I might have to make different videos for some of those topics. But a frequent topic that came up in those questions was breathing. When you play a wind instrument, breathing is obviously so important. I mean, it's important to breathe every day so you don't die, but you know what I mean. There's a lot to say on the topic of how to use your air efficiently and to increase the capacity of air that you're taking in, but I highly recommend checking out the Breathing Gym. There's a book and a DVD, I believe, and I know it's really popular with my brass playing friends, but it also works well for any wind instrument or even for singers. There's a ton of really helpful exercises that help you learn how to use your air correctly and efficiently, and I promise that if you start to do them, you will notice a huge change in your playing. I'll put the link for the DVD and the book in the description box in case you guys want to check it out. I'm not sponsored by them at all. I just really love their material, and I think that it's a great resource for anyone that is trying to get better at playing their instrument. So when you're done practicing, it's important to clean your flute and put it away correctly. Your flute should come with a cleaning rod, and it's going to look something like this. It's basically just this stick, and it's going to have this hole here on the end, like a giant needle almost. You're going to take your cleaning rod, and then you're going to need a cleaning cloth, so either something that is specifically made for this purpose. This is this Beaumont cleaning cloth, which I love because it comes in all of these fun patterns. And it's super absorbent, but you could also take an old piece of like thin fabric or an old silk scarf, something like that. So you want to thread the cloth through the eye of the cleaning rod here, and then put it like so, and then you're going to thread it through your instrument. Also, when you take your flute apart, you want to remember the same things we talked about when we put it together. So not grabbing the keys, but grabbing from the barrel, grabbing from the end of the foot joint, and just gently twisting it off. And you can take your cleaning cloth on your cleaning rod and thread it through the flute. This helps get rid of any condensation or moisture that's inside your instrument. And you want to make sure you do that before you put it away, because you don't want that moisture to sit inside your flute while it's in the case. Like, it's not a good idea. Also, you don't want to store this inside your flute. Like, that defeats the purpose, because now this has all the moisture on it and it's just going to be put back in your flute. So don't do that. Try to store it in a separate place. Then you're going to want to take a microfiber cloth of some type to clean down the outside of your flute and to get off any fingerprints or any oils from your skin. And again, making sure to be really gentle with the flute. And then put it carefully back in the case and make sure that your case is closed before you pick it up so it doesn't fall down on the ground. I've seen that happen. Not a pretty sight. Also, about once a year, it's important to take your flute to a technician for them to kind of give it a checkup, or a COA, which stands for Clean, Oil, and Adjust. And this helps to make sure that everything is in tip-top shape and that your flute is functioning properly. So I know that was kind of like a crash course into flute basics, but I hope this video was helpful to you. There's obviously so much more I could say about all the topics that I discussed and even the ones that I didn't. So if you do have any other questions about beginner flute stuff, be sure to leave them for me in the comments below, and I will try to respond to as many as possible, or even make a video based off of one of those topics. Also, a huge thank you again to the Flute Center of New York for making this video possible, and I'll have all that information, like I said earlier, put in the description box in case you guys are interested. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any future content from me, and be sure to go connect with me over on Instagram at katieflute. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.